So far, this chapter has focused on how to use the keyboard to interact with Excel, but in this lesson we will diverge from that concept to show you some useful tools for making Excel easier to work within from a view standpoint. For this lesson, we'll be working entirely on the View tab of the ribbon, with almost all of our focus being on the window grouping. Excel is as much a visualization tool as it is a spreadsheet and data tool, and being able to manipulate and maximize the usefulness of your view can make your work easier to complete and less prone to error. Let's begin with a common problem. You have a data set on one worksheet tab like this one displaying the number of units of each food item sold at a given store, and you're trying to create a summary on another tab. In standard Excel use, you'd have to switch back and forth between the tabs while writing your formulas or copying your data. Many people, myself included, have 2 or more monitors available to them. If you don't have multiple monitors, then this particular solution will be a little bit more challenging. Pressing the new window command, Alt-WN, will cause a secondary window to open that is accessing the same Excel file. Since I cannot record both monitors simultaneously, I will use another feature useful for single monitor users called the Arrange All feature, Alt-WA. If you do have multiple monitors enabled, this command will not arrange them as shown in this video, as for this demonstration I am only using a single monitor. This command will ask you how you'd like to arrange your windows and whether to use just the current workbook, or if you leave it unchecked, all open workbooks. I'm going to use only windows of the active workbook, and I'm going to choose to view them horizontally. Once I do this and press OK, both windows will get equal monitor space and be aligned horizontally. The only difference between these two windows is that one has a 2 after the workbook name, and the other has a 1 after the workbook name. By doing this, I can still see where I'm setting any formulas up, just in case I haven't had enough coffee this morning and can't quite remember my original purpose when I started writing it. Obviously, with 2 monitors, you would be able to split this across both monitors and see the entirety of both windows without needing to use the Arrange All command. With this view, I can select either window and modify it to be the view that I want in that window. For this bottom view, I'm going to select my data example so that I can see the data that I want to import into my summary. Now I can use my Control-Tab hotkey to jump between windows without ever disrupting my view in any way. But there's still something missing from my original data example view. I'd like to be able to scroll down and still see my headers, and then scroll to the right and still see my row labels. Because of how small the window is, I am unable to do that, so let's introduce another command. To solve this problem, let me show you the Freeze Panes commands. The Freeze Panes drop-down in the View box has a series of different options. Each of these commands will lock a different portion of your window in place so that no matter where you scroll, that row or column will remain visible. In my current view, you can see rows 1 through 8 and columns A through W, but I want to always be able to see row 4 so that I know which store I'm looking at. If I scroll down so that row 4 is my very top row, and I go to Freeze Panes, selecting Freeze Top Row will make row 4 always appear as the top row in my worksheet, no matter what I do. Scrolling down, you can see that my second row changes, but my top row always remains as row number 4. Since I have labels in columns A and B, I would also like to be able to freeze the first 2 columns so that if I scroll to the right, both of these columns stay visible. There is a command just like this, the Freeze First Column command. When I freeze the first column, I can scroll down and my top frozen row has been removed, but if I scroll to the right, column A always stays visible. Since each of these functions replaces the other, it'd also be nice to be able to freeze 2 columns, which is where my generic Freeze Panes command comes into play. To determine where to freeze your panes with the more generic command, you'll want to select the first cell below the row that you want to freeze and the first cell to the right of the column that you want to freeze. Since I want to freeze columns A and B, I will need to select the cell in column C. Since I want to freeze row 4, I need to select the cell in row 5, and I'll want my view to exclude rows 1 and 2 so that I don't show all of that missing space. All of my criteria are met by cell C5. So by selecting C5, I can go to the Freeze Panes dropdown, choose Unfreeze Panes first to break my prior settings, and then re-choose Freeze Panes from the dropdown to freeze them. Once I've done this, I can scroll down and maintain my view of the top 2 rows, and scroll to the right while maintaining my view of the first 2 columns. This is how I want my view to be for this worksheet. However, note that if I ever want to see rows 1 or 2 again, I will need to unfreeze my panes first. Before we close out this chapter and lesson, I should explain how the freeze panes command will modify how a pair of your keyboard commands will function. Whenever you freeze panes, you're effectively changing your home position within an Excel worksheet. What exactly does that mean? Well, if you remember a few lessons back, I showed you how the Home key would take you to column A, and the Control Home key would take you to cell A1. By changing your home position, you've changed how these hotkeys work. The Home key will actually take you to the very first column in your worksheet that is not frozen. In our case, since we've frozen columns A and B, our Home key would take us to column C. So if I go way out to cell AB104 and I press Home, I'll end up at cell C104 rather than cell A104. Similarly, our Control Home key combination will take us to the very first cell in our worksheet that is not within our frozen panes. For this example, this would be cell C3. So no matter where I am, pressing Control Home will take me to cell C3, even if I start from a cell within our frozen area such as B104. Optimizing your Excel view can simplify many tasks and make your work easier and less error-prone. In conjunction with the keyboard skills we've covered this chapter in common Excel functions, you now have the tools to be far faster and far more efficient in Excel than ever before. Our next chapter will dive into some of the most commonly asked about and frequently used functions, the lookup functions.